please join me in welcoming Steve Pullins, VP at Hitachi Systems. Come on up.
Eric.
So, first of all, thank you. We could not have built the microgrid without the Hitachi and Spray team doing all the design and systems integration. And it's great because we basically set out to build a microgrid in a day. And I'd say microgrid in a day plus many late hours and early morning the next day. So thank you. It's great to see that it's all off-the-shelf technologies that are being integrated together. Now, we're super proud of this, but it's pretty different to power a ballroom, versus a data center. So what's driving this over the last couple of years, the rise in microgrids?
I think it's several things. Organizations, including utilities, but mainly customers, so campuses, university campuses, industrial campuses, commercial campuses, communities are starting to ask themselves some questions. Do I feel like my status quo energy service is going to carry me forward as the world is changing? Am I going to be able to keep pace with that, or is my energy service going to be helping me? Do I feel like this solution, my existing solution, is reliable? Is it going to, again, carry me forward with my continuity of business or continuity of mission-critical operations? Am I going to be able to predict? And am I going to be able to meet my sustainability goals, reduce my carbon footprint or my other emissions over time to keep track with the changing world out there? And I think these questions are causing people to ask themselves, well, how do I feel about energy? What do I think I can do? And if I don't have good answers to those questions, then I need to learn.
Well, then why microgrid? Where does that specifically come in that question?
I think a lot of people, when they think about I need to change, they start thinking distributed because that has an essence of more self-control and has an essence of I can take care of this myself. And businesses have that desire to have a little bit more control of their environment so that they can meet objectives, all kinds of objectives. And I think that's what's driving people to consider microgrids, because microgrids as a complete or a comprehensive energy system that is very local to the community or very local to the business or the campus where the business resides. I think that's what's caused the buzz, if you will, and why people are most interested in exploring whether or not a microgrid can be helpful.
Yeah, so you have designed 50 microgrids, actually.
Yeah, about 55 right
55,
now.
built 11. You were part of the first community microgrid, the Borrego Springs outside of San Diego. What were the specific drivers of that project? And just talk about that project.
All right, so that's a project, the Borrego Springs community is out in the desert. It's about 80 miles outside of downtown San Diego. So it's out through the forest, up over the mountains, and out through the desert. And that was the worst performing portion of the entire San Diego gas and electric system. And so
from a reliability point of view.
From a reliability perspective. So it became a good candidate to prove out that microgrids actually enhance reliability and provide options. And within the first 6 months of operations of that microgrid, there were so many opportunities for the microgrid to keep customers up and operating we hadn't even envisioned in our whole design process. So I think that's one of the big key things that we see about microgrids. We think we understand what microgrids are going to deliver from a benefits perspective. What we see after the microgrid is up and operational is a much more expanded set of benefits. So we don't even know where all the benefits are going to arise.
I don't know if you saw the conversation with Andrew Beebe and Jager Shaw yesterday, but Andrew asked him, is distributed energy sort of a nailable right? do people just, because assuming you could buy just 100% renewable straight from utility, do people want to have DG themselves? And his answer was yes. Do you feel like that larger scale customers are starting to feel like that too?
Yes, we've seen this in many states where we've worked with large-scale commercial and industrials that even though they can get extremely affordable energy from their local utility, there's a certain amount of desire. It's kind of like, in our DNA around our entrepreneurialism and our desire to grow the business, that we are looking for all those levers
Right.
that matter. And if one of those levers is energy supply, then the customer wants to have more local control of that, like they do in their manufacturing processes.
Yeah, it's interesting because I put solar in my house finally, and my wife was into the idea until she thought it might impact the way our Craftsman looks. So we had a big debate about where we could put it. When eventually figured out, thanks to Sungevity, how to not see from the street. But it was a complete abstraction to her until the conversation of having an EV, and then those two things became connected. And the idea that not only was she not having to go to the gas station, but her EV was being charged by the thing on the roof. And I think microgrids could be that kind of sense of independence, sense of freedom at a systems level, which I think is, that gets to my next question, which is, you've heard a lot about, Walmart yesterday talking about 100% renewable. A lot of the corporates are making very deep commitments to renewables. The state of Hawaii. Why should they go a step further and think about tying that into a full microgrid approach? It's got to be more expensive.
It may or may not be more expensive. It kind of depends on the case. But I will tell you, I'll give you an example of a retailer that we did some design work for. It's a pharmacy, so a large pharmacy chain, and looking at 200 of their stores in Florida and how we could play that out. And actually the cost savings was a concern, or a desire, but it was to add to the sustainability goals because they have changing leadership, and it was more interested in some sustainability goals. But the biggest driver was to be able to be the place on the block that was up and operating with the pharmacy and their coolers and where some food and some conveniences there, up and operating on that block when a storm comes through.
Right.
And that was a big driver.
And you said Florida?
Florida.
Right. Well, they're going to have quite a few issues. So it's resilience then, basically, but it's still a bigger investment. I mean, you can't just put solar on the roof. You've got to put storage. Talk about the components of a microgrid.
So in a microgrid, and why I said it may or may not be, is that if you're using some combined heat and power, let's say natural gas fired combined heat and power, and in a Florida case, you may have an absorption chiller on the back end so that you can provide cooling for those stores and the refrigeration, plus the PV, plus an energy storage to help stitch it all together. That solution commonly supplies more energy to that store than just looking at it from a PV perspective or just from a CHP or combined heat and power unit perspective. Right. So the combination actually allows you to better match the load curve, which varies through the day. And in that, you're actually providing more, you're meeting more of the objectives, whether it's cost, reliability, resiliency, and emissions reduction with that kind of approach. And that's why the microgrids are, like you said, just kind of like that next step beyond solar on your roof or a CHP in your basement.
So there's a lot of conversation about friend or foe utility. Are they where are they on the spectrum of this? What is with? We do believe, I said this yesterday, that the future is distributed, and the energy market's no different than other markets, and we'll see an increase in this. Do the utilities win or lose in this model?
Some yes, some no. I think, first of all, we have to, if you step back and take a look at it and run some projections on where this all goes, I think what you're going to see is by 2035, around there, then we're going to kind of start hitting an equilibrium around 16 to 20% of the energy supply in the country being supplied with distributed resources. And the reason it hits an equilibrium is as you're doing those kinds of things, the competition will drive some costs down from the bulk power system or the central station generation. So I think we're going to have a meeting of the ways, and I think we're going to have a hybrid system. So with that, though, you might say, well, if you take 20% of the energy out of the utility world, not all folks are going to fight that, and actually some folks are going to see that 16 to 20% might be a really good business to get into, and we're seeing utilities do that at an increasing rate over the last year. But I think for those who are concerned about the utility death spiral, I think it's more of a culling of the herd. I think we're just going to see a few of those which were marginal performers anyway, who can't accommodate, let's say, a 5% decrease in their revenue stream or something like that, being the ones who get acquired by somebody else, by another utility.
Right. So shifting to the tech side just for a second, you guys are generally technology agnostic in terms of what kinds of power generation you guys use, but with Spray it's slightly different. Talk about your relationship with Spray.
So we have a very strategic long-term relationship with Spray. They are the best microgrid controls company in the world, and we're happy to say that to anybody who will ask. They've got more experience and they've done more projects, and they're more sophisticated, which matches our goals of providing to communities and more complex customers. So that's it's a big thing for us, and the controls aspect is kind of a core to managing the microgrid. So we feel like we had to pick a horse to ride in that part of it, but be technology agnostic on everything else.
Right. You're not going to have two controllers.
It would be too difficult.
Yeah. So I'm going to go to sidebar in a second, just to say it's been great for us. Spray, this is the 5th version of the microgrid we've built, and I feel like Spray and VERGE are sort of growing up in parallel with each other, which is great to watch this ecosystem grow and thrive. So sidebar, what do you guys have for us?
So one of the questions one of the things that takes something mainstream is the ease of installation, the time, the project cycles, how quickly, approvals, all that stuff, right? So what's the recipe? What's the typical cycle now, and what's the recipe that's going to take this mainstream?
I think the longest part of the entire cycle from initial thought to operation of a microgrid is the year of convincing. There's a lot of education that has to go on with the customer, with the local utility, and with other stakeholders who might be in that process. And that takes a long time. And then designing it, 5 months, building it out 6 or 8 months. So it's really that first year of convincing. And I think that's where we're going to see, as there's more and more adoption of microgrids, we're going to see that cycle get very, very small. We saw that over the last 10 years with solar projects.
Right.
It used to take 2 or 3 years to get permission to do a large-scale solar project, and now it's really months now.
Are there particular industries that are further out ahead? Are there in terms of stadiums, or what are the groups or industries that are sort of leading this at this point?
Well, definitely universities, and universities have been building microgrids on their own campuses for more than a decade. And they have been the ones who have really experimented with different methodologies of control and different technologies and how you integrate X with Y and those kinds of things. So I think they have been the ones who have also seen the most benefit, the increase in reliability around how they serve their own laboratories that may have long-term testing going on and cannot afford an interruption and things like that. So there's an excellent candidate or microgrid in UC San Diego, just an excellent example of this space. Next to them, we have to look back at the pulp and paper folks. The fact that they've been, may not have called it that, but they have been microgrids for decades. They are using some of the waste bioprocesses to feed back into their on-site generation. You know,
They're so energy intensive.
they're so energy intensive that they've really had to close a lot of those loops that are within their processes.
And hopefully adding more renewables into their mix as well.
And that has not always been the case. And the first place what they've gone is to take the the wood waste and pulp waste and things like that and bring that into their process, which is renewable.
Right.
But we're also seeing more and more use of PV in that space as well.
Cool. Well, thank you very much. I appreciate it.
My
Please
pleasure.
join me in thanking Steve Pullins. Thank you, Steve.